Everyone is a star child, made of stardust and the infinite potential of the universe. This extraordinary fearless something in each of us clamors for freedom from the bonds of fear, conformity, and an ordinary life. Welcome to Dr. Durr's Living in the Sweet Spot, where practical tools and solutions from the intersection of mind-body medicine, science, and spiritual well-being awaken and empower you to live out your infinite potential, to live life in the sweet spot. Each of us learns about who we are and what's possible for us from the people around us, from our families, our communities, from the societies and countries that we live in. So today we're going to talk about passports to possibilities, how it can unlock your identity and your hidden potential through the enriching journey of international living and travel. And joining me today for that conversation is my guest, Dr. Terry Spain.
Dr. Ballin, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show today. I'm excited. This is going to be a really great show today. I'm excited about it.
Absolutely. I'm excited about it too, because, as I was listening to you on a different show and hearing your story, what immediately clicked with me is something about, your childhood and how you grew up as a child of someone in the Navy. Your dad was in the Navy. And
Marine Corps.
That's right. I'm sorry. Because in my mind, I know that the Marines are part of the Navy.
Right. But don't let them say that. Those are fighting words.
I know. That's why I said, but don't tell your dad I said that. So it's again, how growing up, living abroad, and how that would have shaped your ideas and perspectives and beliefs about who you are and what's possible for you, especially compared to being an African-American man growing up in this country. And I said, I want to have a conversation with him about that and, and how it's impacted you personally, but also then how that has shaped and influenced the work that you do.
All right. That sounds good to me. I'm excited to, talk about all of this. So
yeah. It's definitely going to be a great conversation. And, you're pretty awesome yourself. So those,
appreciate that.
Oh, you're more than welcome. So for those folks who, again, not had the privilege or the honor of, connecting with you just yet, Dr. Terry Spain is the Chief Executive Officer of Terry Spain Consulting, LLC, specializing in diversity and leadership training, motivational speaking, mentoring, and team building. With a distinguished 21-year career in the U.S. Navy, Terry served as an instructor for the Senior Leadership Development Branch at the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute, also known as DEOMI, in Patrick Air Force Base, Florida, where his exceptional skills attracted the attention of the White House and the U.S. Naval Academy, amongst others, before he retired. Terry is also the author of Hey, Young Man, and Just Lead. Again, he is a U.S. Navy petty officer, retired, and is a highly experienced sports commentator providing expert coverage of various professional sport leagues, including the NBA, the NFL, and the NCAA. Additionally, he's deeply committed to mentoring athletes to help them reach their full potential, both on and off the field.
Yes, indeed. And also, so my brothers and sisters in the chief community would never let me live this down. So a retired chief petty officer instead of petty officer, because see, they'll never let me live this down when you was reading the my bio on there. So
yeah, we absolutely. So one, my apologies, and two, we actually want to get that rank right.
Yeah, because trust me, it's a thing. I wouldn't hear the end of it.
Well, you know what? No, I understand. I understand it's a thing because my ex-husband is actually a retired master sergeant,
Okay.
in the army. So,
Oh yeah. Okay. So
so
you know.
absolutely, that rank is everything.
Oh yeah.
So, as I mentioned a little bit ago, your dad was, I'm gonna get it right. Your dad is a retired Marine. And so, you grew up moving around, and then again, you all moved to Italy when you were 12 years old.
Hmm.
So I wanted to share with us how you living abroad in Italy and all the other places that you all lived outside of the US, how that shaped your sense of, who you are, your identity, and your possibilities.
Well, Dr. Ballin, I first want to say that living overseas, it really heightened my awareness to a lot of things. We moved from Conway, South Carolina. That's where I'm originally from. But my dad was in the Marine Corps, so at that time he was stationed on Paris Island, which is in Beaufort, South Carolina. But we left Conway, South Carolina, and I was 12 years old, and we had an opportunity to move to Italy. So of course, I was extremely excited along with my siblings about moving overseas because this was the first time we've ever done that, and it was something new for all of us. And so living overseas definitely broadened my horizons. I had an opportunity leaving South Carolina, not knowing the language, but having an opportunity to kind of pick up the language while I'm some Italian, and meeting Italian people and still stay connected to a lot of these Italian folks that are that I grew up with in Italy, and some of the military dependents that was there. And this was over 30 years ago, and I'm still close to a lot of these former military dependents that grew up with me in Italy. So seeing a different language, seeing a country, stuff that I used to read in my history books, things that I used to see on TV, I was able to go and visit that country and just broaden my horizons.
So, what were some of those places that you got to visit that were in the history books? Because I can imagine, it's like like standing on the steps of the Acropolis, and I mean, I know that's Greece. I know that's
Yes.
Greece, but I'm just, I'm saying it's. I can imagine, that kind of thing, especially, and if you stand on, certain battlefields,
Yes.
the energy and the history of that. So, what were some of those places for you?
Well, so one of the things that really stood out to me, and it really stood out to my mom too, was the Spanish Steps in Rome. When we had an opportunity to go to Rome and see the Spanish Steps and the Vatican, those stood out to me. But another thing that really stood out to me is I had an opportunity to go to. I took a summer trip with one of the family friend, and we went to Germany. We also went to Belgium and Switzerland and a few other countries as well. So seeing those countries after reading them and studying up on them, I was like speechless. I think at that time I didn't know how good I had it until I gotten older. And when I actually came back to the United States, I was able to appreciate those countries more. But Rome was definitely one of the things for me. And Capri, it's an island right off the coast of Naples, Isle of Capri. And my sister actually got married in Capri.
So yeah, I can just imagine how that must have been for you, right? Because I think about, because I love to travel. And
Yes.
the reason I love to travel is because travel frees my mind. And in a very intentional, purposeful way, I can't operate off a routine, right? I have to think about what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? How I'm going to get there? What kind of food do I want to eat? And I have found that obviously the energy of places is different. So one of the places I love is Paris.
Mhm.
J'adore Paris. Uh,
I
I
see you love it. I can hear the accent.
Yes, yes. So yeah, I adore Paris, and there's again, the energy of it is such that for me, that I'm so at home and comfortable there.
Mm-hmm.
Places that tend to be French speaking, like in Saint Martin, that people when they thought I was Parisian, and it's so it's a very different sense also of myself
Mm-hmm.
and other people's perceptions of me as well, right? They think I'm Parisian. I've had people say that they thought I was African, not
Right.
African American, but they thought I was African.
Mm-hmm.
Or there are other places where I've been where they thought I was Dominican,
Mm-hmm.
or they thought I was Cuban. So again, to me, it was one of those things. It was eye opening and mind expanding or awareness expanding, because other people are seeing me differently also, compared to some of the more, I think, limited ways that as an African American woman that I'm seeing here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So again, how did that, like, what form did that take for you specifically in terms of your own identity?
You talk about as far as like living overseas and
Yeah, how that influenced, yeah, living overseas and traveling internationally, how that influenced, your perceptions, of yourself, of who you are as an
well,
Asian.
and I had and one of the unique things is like I went there at 12 years old, so and being a young African American male going to a different country where a lot of people don't look like you. We did have Africans that were actually living in the country, but just having the African Americans that you can relate to that was from the United States. There was some that was they're affiliated from the military, but quite honestly, it really made me kind of hone into myself. I gravitated to sports. Obviously, I played basketball while living overseas. Even in high school, I played over there as well. But just getting to know myself and then getting ready and getting to appreciate the language and the culture, I was able to establish more confidence within myself. And that's what I normally do from here on out. Even any other country that I would visit, I would try to take that same approach that I took as a young child to kind of mold myself into getting ingrained into other countries. I love to travel, like you mentioned before. So traveling is definitely high on my list, and so I was able to take what I've learned, the stuff that I used when I was from 12 years old, even in my teenage years, and still apply that to now.
So tell me something. How'd you end up in the Navy instead of as a Marine? Given your daddy was a Marine.
How much time you got? Trust me.
Maybe not enough this time. We might have to do a part two, but we'll see what we get this time.
All right. Well, just the quick condensed version why I didn't join the Marine Corps. I had a surgery. I had a surgery that didn't allow me to join the Marine Corps. So the doctors only recommended two branches for me, which was the Navy or the Air Force. But the reason why I chose the Air Force is because, as you know, the Air Force. I'm sorry. The reason why I chose the Navy is because a lot of a
Freudian
lot
slip.
of
Freudian slip.
yeah. Oh man, that hurt.
So why you chose the Navy was what?
The reason why I chose the Navy was because there's a couple reasons. I had two brother-in-laws that was in the Navy, and I had some family members that were in the Navy. And ironically enough, one of my cousins, his ship got a chance to come over to Italy where we were stationed at. And I've met a lot of these sailors that was getting off the ship, and they was telling me all the wonderful places they visited or where they're going to next after they leave Naples. And that kind of in the back of my mind, that stuck with me because I was like, man, these folks, at that time they were doing 6-month deployments, but they was hitting like 10 and 15 ports. They're going to Greece, Paris, they're going to, all these different countries that were in Europe. And I was like, man, that was kind of fascinating to me. So when it was time for me to make my decision on what I wanted to do in life, those things played back in my head about, okay, man, I remember these guys getting off the ship and going to different places. I had two brother-in-laws that were in the Navy. I had some cousins that were in the Navy. So all that kind of just steered my choice in joining the world's greatest Navy.
So I want to hear about some of those places you visited.
Okay. Well, so I've been to 45 countries.
Wow.
and that's including I went to Vladivostok, Russia. I went to Hong Kong, Thailand, Australia, Africa twice, um,
So
South
now,
Tomé, Principe.
since Africa is a continent,
Yeah,
country, and it's the biggest continent on the planet.
the biggest.
Yes. So where did you go in Africa?
Okay, so I had an opportunity to participate in this exercise called AFCOM Partnership Station West, which is where I dealt with a lot of things on in West Africa. I was the PAO, Public Affairs, for West Africa, so Nigeria, Congo, Sierra Leone, Senegal. I
Mhm.
traveled all over West Africa doing this AFCOM Partnership Station West. So that was my first time being exposed to the continent,
Mhm.
and I have to admit, I was that changed my entire outlook on life. The things that really mattered to me, or I thought that was a big deal, living in the United States, wasn't too much of a big deal because I saw how these men and women lived, and I saw how they were able to not everybody was impoverished, but I had an opportunity to see how happy they were with less. And so I said to myself, I used to get upset when the internet would run slow or when my phone wasn't working right, right? But interacting with these men and women while living over in West Africa, my whole attitude and thought process changed, and I'm extremely grateful for it.
So what became important to you now as a consequence of that experience?
Just living, relationships, friendships, health, those things became a lot more important to me after leaving Africa.
Okay. But I just wanted to I wanted to acknowledge that again, it really is, eye opening to travel to other places.
Yeah.
And so what I want to do though is um, let's take a break, and then when we come back, we'll pick up on it because I also want to see if there are some other influences in terms of your international travel that may have, again, affected your perspectives and your aspirations. And so we'll take a break, and then we'll be right back.
Okay.
Heaven Abounds in You takes you on an inward journey of discovery that dramatically transforms your outward experience of life. Discover the power of belief. Utilize it in connection with science to create a vision of meaning and purpose that pulls you forward. Let go of the meager me to discover the magnificent me. Let go of your painful past and live life free from fear, worry, and stagnation. Experience an abundant universe as you powerfully create happiness, relationships, health, and limitless opportunities. When you heal your mind, all things are possible. Dr. Ballin A. Durr here with my guest, Dr. Terry Spain, and we are talking about Passport to Possibilities, unlocking your identity and hidden potential. So before the break, we were talking about how travel would have, changed your perspective, uh, values, and even your aspirations.
Yeah, and quite honestly, so we're doing a lot of traveling, even from an early age. You remember how I mentioned before how we would read different things in history books, and for you to be able to actually see those things, those really actually going to Rome and visiting the Vatican, they changed my perspective on a lot of things because um, when I would have an opinion or someone else would have an opinion about a certain culture or a certain statue or a certain anything and oftentimes they've never seen it, they never visited it, so I had to take face value for myself and actually go and visit these places. And that's one of the things that I do now, is that I understand that people have their own opinions. Like you and I spoke about Paris, and I mentioned to you about my experiences in Paris, and you were mentioning how great your experiences were. But honestly, it just I'm willing to visit Paris again because of how much you've talked about it and how great that you talked about it. And I thought to myself, and this is some of the things I think that we need to do is say, well, maybe we missed out on a few things. Maybe we didn't see what we should have saw, or we didn't encounter the things that you encounter. So I like to travel, and I like to incorporate different people in my travels so that I can get a better perspective on life and get a better perspective on their cultures as well, because sometimes that can be overlooked. And there's a lot of cultures in the world that think that the United States is arrogant, right? And
I
so
wonder why.
and so I can remember one time when I was living in Japan,
Uh-huh.
and if you don't know about the Japanese cultures, they don't talk as much in public like we do. We're loud and things of that nature. We like to make jokes and some of these things. But I sat on the train one day, and I observed. I'm an observer, so I sat on the train one day and I watched these Japanese men and women just either reading, or some was on their phone, but that was it. There was really no talking, no nothing. But they had a couple Americans that was on there. They were loud, and the Japanese folks were just looking at them like what's what, because they didn't understand the culture
Mm-hmm.
and things of that nature. So just by for me, um, understanding people's cultures and understanding that Japanese are punctual people, they're not as loud as we are. It just makes me appreciate traveling abroad and incorporating other people into other people's cultures so they can see and take back some of the things that they've learned, and actually utilize those things and mimic those here in the United States.
So you know what that is such a great point, or I should say great points that you make. And one of the things that was part of a conversation that we had about this very thing. So one, I'm glad you're gonna go and go back to Paris. uh,
I'm gonna give it one more chance.
so, so here's the other thing too, though, that I say, and people talk about how they feel like they've been snubbed,
Mhm.
and that French folks are rude or arrogant to them, and do you know what I say? You know what I say to them, Terry?
What's that?
Tell them, I say, think about if this was your house. Would you want someone to come to your house and say, I don't want to speak your language. I don't want to eat your food. I don't want to do what you do. I want to do what I do. So when
Hmm.
folks say, so I'm going, how would you feel under those circumstances?
Yeah.
And so I tell folks, so if you really are not opening to expanding your mind and your
Hmm.
awareness and in perspective from the fact that there's more than one way to do things,
Right.
and if you really want to keep doing it the way you're doing it at home, then stay at home. Stay
Hey,
home.
hey, point taken. I'm telling you, I definitely understand. It baffles me though. But there's a lot of cultures that they actually speak English, but they won't speak English if you're not trying to speak their language. I have witnessed that on several occasions. But the thing about it is, one of the things when we talked about me growing up in Italy, let me tell you one of the things that prepared me for living overseas was I learned the language. So every country that I went to, growing up as an adult, um, I learned some phrases to get me by. When I lived in the Philippines, I learned Tagalog a little. When I lived in Japan, I spoke uh, Japanese a little. Not, I wasn't fluent, but it got me by, right?
Yes, yes.
Um, when I went to Africa last year, I went to Eldoret, Kenya, and Nairobi, Kenya, when I did an empowerment summit. I learned Swahili.
Ah.
I'm not fluent. I'm not nowhere near fluent, but I know the basics. And so those are if I think if we adopt those ideas, it will make our time in these different countries a whole lot smoother.
Of course it would. And so I want to applaud you. Bravo. And making that effort. And I tell people, I think that's also too why I have a different experience in Paris than other people do, because I
Hmm.
do make the effort to speak, to speak French. I say to someone, bonjour, je m'appelle Balin,
Yeah.
um, je parle un petit peu français.
Mm. Speak a little French.
That's right.
Va bene. That means okay in Italiano.
Yes, and so number one, I say what I know, and then obviously at the course of having the conversation, then what starts to happen is my vocabulary starts to come back. And
Hmm.
so I start saying more and more things, but they appreciate the fact that I make the effort,
Right.
right?
Right.
They're also this you should the surprised look on their face at the quality of my accent. They're like, wow, you speak really well, right? Because I'm intentional
Yes.
about speaking the language as as best to the best of my ability, and sounding as much like their accent as I can. And
It's
so,
fun. It's funny you should say that because when I speak Italian, I speak like an Italian. So
mhm.
folks look at me like, "Que cosa fai?" You know, and they're like, "Oh my god!" Like they cannot believe it. But that comes from years of practicing, and a lot of folks don't know that I actually grew up there too. So that definitely helps out a lot. So I can definitely understand where you're coming from when you actually you speak the language, but then you speak it in their tongue. So I definitely understand that.
Yeah, and it's greatly appreciated. So I
Yes.
think, again, I think then that opens up their hearts and receptivity to me, uh, because I am making the effort,
Right.
right? Because
Mhm.
like you said, because sometimes you speak, please, and when I say what I can say, then I'll say, parler anglais, and they're like, yeah.
Yeah, I do. I speak three languages.
Well, and that's the other part too, that I think that as Americans we're really at a disadvantage. When
Mhm.
I'm in Saint Martin, and Saint Martin has a Dutch side and a French
And
side,
French side, right?
there are people there. It's like more than 100 countries is what I've been told,
Hmm.
if I remember correctly. And so everyone that's there that lives there, they're speaking 3 or 4 languages.
Mm. Interesting.
Compared, yes, compared to me and my little bit of French, and then hablo muy poquito español.
Right.
You know, I tell you, I've got more medical Spanish than I just do, conversational Spanish. I
Hmm.
tell people, it's like abra la boca, which means open your mouth. Saca la lengua
Yep.
means stick out your tongue. Respira profundo. So I got the more medical Spanish. But the point is that, again, I'm making the effort.
Right.
Yeah, I'm making the effort, and although thankfully now there's Google Translate. So when I was in
Oh yeah.
Morocco, when I
Oh
was
yeah.
in Morocco, my because I know Morocco is a Muslim country, even though
Hmm.
it's moderate.
Right.
I didn't have to dress. I didn't have to wear a hijab or anything like that. I was still, as you pointed out, but I was mindful
Right.
that
Hmm.
it's a Muslim country. I was mindful about how I dressed.
Hmm.
So while I didn't wear, maxi dresses or maxi skirts or anything like that, I never wore anything that was, that was too short, or
Hmm.
was too exposed or anything like that. So when I would, I had a driver though, because I was like, you know what, this is still a country that defers to men.
Right.
So I took a tour and had a private driver, which helped, I think, a lot.
Hmm.
And he took Hashem took such wonderful care of me that, in looking out for me, and it was a wonderful time. But it's just I was appropriately addressed for them. So like when we would go into mosque, I never had to like cover up where I
Right.
saw
Okay.
some teenagers that had to cover up because how the shorts were too short.
Yeah.
So again, to your point, I think it's important to be mindful of those, of those kind of things. And again, to what I'm saying is, I think that as Americans, we are at a disadvantage because pretty much every place else is speaking three, four languages or
Hmm.
more, whereas we feel entitled to speak English only, and that's enough.
Yeah.
So I encourage folks to again stretch out,
Yeah.
learn something new, learn to see things from a different vantage and from a different perspective. Now, I would really love to hear though, if it was there a specific experience that you had that you really feel that altered, um, caused a major shift for you personally or professionally because of the international travel.
Yeah. And that's a spot on question. Because sometimes I get chills when I talk about it. But this happened recently.
Hmm.
When I told you I had an opportunity to go to Eldoret, Kenya, and Nairobi, Kenya, I was asked to come and do the first ever Kenyan Young Men Empowerment Summit,
Hmm.
and we had a couple hundred young men and women. It was initially for men, but some of the women were like, "Hey, what about us?" So we invited the women to come out, and some of the local women and some of the local politicians that were in the area, they came out and they took the women and kind of gave them some tools, and then for us, I brought along five other gentlemen with me. I had them come along with me. That's from the United States, and they've never traveled to Kenya, and some of them never even went to Africa. So it was rewarding to do an empowerment summit with um, with these young men because we've created a relationship and a bond with them so much so that we still keep in touch to this day. And one of the initiatives that I'm doing is creating a pathways for some of these young men and women to come over to the United States and excel because all they're looking for is just that chance. They're looking for an opportunity to come over here and show what they can do. So I'm already working with folks that can create pathways and hire them on to come to the United States. And but just seeing that, witnessing them, how they gravitated towards us, because it's totally different from. I mentor a lot of young men, and it's just not athletes and women here in the United States, but over there in Africa, obviously they're a lot hungrier for other reasons, right? Because they want to make a better living. They want to do all these different. They want to leave the continent of Africa, the country of uh, of Kenya, and they want to come over to the United States to make it to the United States. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So they want it more in some aspects, but seeing that and seeing how humble they were, but the hunger to me really that whole time I was there really did a number on me because um, they don't take life for granted often, and so they know what they need to do. They want to come to the United States so they can feed their families back in Africa, and then bring them back over, or they come back to Kenya, or some of them, and be able to make a living for themselves in the United States so they can come back to Kenya and help build. And that's what I like. And so just by interacting with them, interacting with some of the local government, I had the opportunity to interact with some of their local government there, and it did absolute wonders for not only for my life, but for those other gentlemen that I invited to come accompany me over to Africa. They can't stop talking about it because they made an impact on those young folks' life, but they don't know, those young folks don't know that they made a huge impact on all of us. So for me traveling over to Kenya and just seeing different things. I've never had an opportunity to travel to West Africa. Like I mentioned it before, I was in East Africa. Well, actually, I was in West Africa living there, but I never got a chance to travel to East Africa. And just to have an opportunity to see that and interact with those folks that are over there, man, I definitely would absolutely go back at any time, and I plan on going back. And if I had it my way, I would actually move over to Nairobi if I could.
Really? So what about Nairobi spoke to your heart so deeply?
You know what? When I mention this to a lot of folks, that's the number one question that they ask me. Like, why Nairobi? I have to be honest with you. The things, oftentimes, the things that you see on TV are not what that's not what it appears or what it is in that place.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I went to Africa, those young men, not even as young, but just those people in general that were there, those Kenyans that were over there, they embraced me so much. And one of the unique things that I had an opportunity to do, and I'm Kenyan now. I already claimed it. I'm already Kenyan.
Okay.
What I was able to do was Kenya is big on agriculture, right? So the school that we were at, they do a lot of planting. They allow me and the guys that were over there plant trees. So the guy told me that you're always going to have roots here in Kenya. So we planted trees, our personal trees, over in Kenya. And I tell you, that did absolute wonders for me. And from then I was hooked. I could literally move to Kenya and be perfectly fine with it. A lot of people think that their technology is not well, but no, they're considered the tech capital of Africa. So Nairobi is a real nice country in the continent of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to admit, if you have not had an opportunity to travel over to Nairobi, I strongly recommend anybody who's listening to this show go over there and see what I'm talking about. And the cost of living is extremely cheap, extremely cheap.
Okay. But yeah, it really touched my heart too, the way you spoke about Nairobi is there can be a level of recognition and seeing oneself in someone else
Hmm.
and seeing them as like you as opposed to saying no, you're not like me, therefore you're the other. And
Right,
then the separations, the fear, the competition, sometimes the things that people do to each other out of that that's extremely harmful.
right.
So I absolutely get what you're saying about that sense and that feeling of being embraced,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
um, and actually actually reminds me too when I even think of my trip to Morocco. There was some a mom and her daughters and one of their friends with them. They were in high school, but they had us. We were dressed in uh, I think it was Bedouin garb, and
Hmm.
and we were riding camels. So we took a picture. This is the before picture, before they dressed us, and then there's the after picture. And I'm in the photo, and I'll show it to people and say, "Pick me out." Do you know a lot of folks have trouble picking me out of that photo?
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I think there is very much, as you well know, all of us are seeking that acceptance and that connection.
Yeah,
And and through that, I think it also enables us to develop an identity that is transcendent beyond who, who I'm not and what I can't do, which therefore I think then frees us to live out our highest self and greatest possibilities.
yeah. I tell you what, it was destined for me to go over to Kenya, and you and I talked about my book, Hey Young Man, right?
Mhm.
The reason why I was able to go to Kenya was because of that book, Hey Young Man.
Okay.
And so we took a lot of the things from that book and incorporated that in the empowerment summit. And so um, just learning, not only having them learn from my book, but actually learning from them and learning their customs and courtesy and all the dialects that they speak over there. I'll tell you what, they had me when I planted my tree. I was already done. I already told them, look, I'm Kenyan, and no way y'all can get away from from I'm not gonna get y'all. I'm not gonna have an opportunity I'm gonna be here every time. They can't get rid of me that easy. So I told them that me planting that tree, and it's something about that, So I want to go back to that. When you asked me what was it, when my travel, it, I'm from South Carolina, so we used to planting our own stuff already, but it was something about planting that tree in Kenya did it for me.
Yeah, and I felt it as you spoke it, because when they said, you have roots here,
Yeah.
and so by planting the tree, you have roots here, so you belong here.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. I think it just speaks to the fact that we really are all connected, even if we don't realize that we are, because
Correct.
everything in the universe is composed of energy, so it's all
Mm-hmm.
connected. And
Right.
so to hear somebody affirm that for you,
Yes.
yeah, it's so heartwarming, and also I think and inspiring, like I said, because now I feel connected, even though I'm not physically here.
Right.
I know that we are connected, and I know that you welcome me back.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
that is awesome.
Yeah.
That's, that's tremendous. And the other thing I thought about too that you said is something that a dear friend of mine, Reverend Evan Reed, said to me when we first met some years ago. And it took me a year before I understood and therefore believed when he said this to me, which was, he said to me, he said, in this relationship, we are both student and teacher.
Mm.
And it took me, and over years' time, I began to see why that was true. So I can connect that to what you were saying
Yeah.
about them. And
Mm-hmm.
then also, I was just going to tell you, if you need a translator, or something else that I can do, let me know. Now I'm gonna need some time so I can work on my French, or
Oh
what
yeah.
I need to work on.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Hey, trust me. Hey, you mentioned before. You said that Google Translator. I use that too, but like we talked about before, I do try to learn some phrases of the language so they can look at me like, oh God, this guy's he's ready. You know what I mean? And so, but yeah, Google Translate is awesome. But I
Yeah.
think it takes a little bit of the guesswork out of you actually learning it yourself.
So
Technology is something, huh?
absolutely, I love technology when it works.
Yes, yes, most
When it
definitely.
works.
You and I both.
Yes, when it works. So you know what? I want to take another break, but then when we come back, let's talk about what you learned in terms of addressing challenges and overcoming adversity in your international travels, and then how that is now being translated, or anything else that you feel are valuable lessons that you learned in your international travel, how that's translated in the work that you do in the Terry Spain consulting.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Hey, Dr. Valen A. Durr here with my guest, Dr. Terry Spain, and we are talking about the passport to possibilities, unlock your identity and hidden potential. So before the break, we left off, we were talking about um, your experiences in Nairobi, um, and some of the things that you learned, the sense of connection. And I said we were going to pick up with saying, what were some of the things that you learned from your international travels regarding, overcoming adversity and challenges that now translates to the work that you're doing in your own company, as CEO, Dr. Terry Spain.
Well, that's definitely a great question, Dr. Ballin. But so one of the things in my travel, I had to realize that not everyone is going to like you. You know, it's not because of your skin color. It's not because you're American, but there's some
Wait,
people.
wait, wait, hold on, come on now. I cannot believe that
that,
everybody doesn't like Dr. Terry Spain.
but you know what? I know it's tough, but trust me, they're out there. I don't know. I don't know who these people are thinking, but something's wrong with them. But no, honestly, just by by going to certain countries. Some of them I'll just remain nameless, but I can remember an instance where um, my ship went to a different country, and they didn't really like Americans at all. And so I had to find out the history and the reasoning why they didn't like African Americans or they didn't like Americans at all. So I had to go back, do history, read, and quite honestly, that's what prepared me with the Terry Spain Consulting, because there's not going to be people. There's some people that don't like the topics that I may be able to teach, because that's the way it's always been. That's one of the most dangerous phrases that we use here in the United States or in the world. It's always been this way.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized that some people did not like me from other countries because they were taught not to like Americans, right? So when I teach
Based,
leadership,
based upon some limited perceptions
exactly,
with a certain number of folks, and or no, or actually not even having met anyone, but something that they've been told.
right, exactly. So when I teach these leadership courses, when I teach diversity and inclusion, when I teach human relation classes, I do activities that brings people together, in particular the socialization activity that I use, because that's where it all originates from, your socialization, where how you've been brought, how you've been taught up. And so I put them back in the mindset of a 12-year-old person and where they grew up, and I show them the similarities that they have with someone that lives or was born and raised in California, and how similar they could be with someone that was born in Iowa, and so when I bring them together and I see that, and they see that, they look at each other like, wow, I had no idea. I've walked past you several times. I've seen you 5 or 6 times a day, and I never knew that we had this similarity. And so that's one of the things that I like to do with the Terry Spain Consulting, is just bringing people together and showing people, hey, we're a lot more alike than we are different in some aspects. And so when I do these different trainings, when I do these different do consulting classes, they get it, and I'm not there to try to change them. I'm there to try to alter their way of thinking and let them know that, hey, just because you was brought up this particular way doesn't necessarily mean that this is the way you have to live as an adult. And so seeing other countries and how I try to interact with people. That's why I tell you it's very important to learn different languages, because folks will come over to another country and people say, oh, those stupid Americans, they're loud, they're obnoxious, they don't want to learn. But when you go over there and you say, hey, teach me,
Mm-hmm.
show me,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I've learned. Now they're looking at me like, oh man, like this is pretty good. They want to learn. Very similar to with the stuff that I bring and the activities that I bring when I teach these classes, because those folks already have this preconceived notion of a particular culture or a particular person. And when you see that, okay, wow, we're a lot alike,
Mm-hmm.
now we're bringing everybody together. So
Yes.
that's one of the things that I have been using and I like to do.
So you of course you make some wonderful points, and again I said this earlier, which is, you know we're all human beings are spiritual beings, depending upon
Mhm.
how you identify. And as I like to say, we're all, in terms of the physical, beneath the skin and the hair color and the color of the eyes and
Mhm.
the shapes of noses and lips and all the rest of this. And I wear a size 11 shoe, and I don't know, what size you wear, but and but underneath there, we all have a heart and a liver and lungs and kidneys
Exactly.
and muscles and bones and sinew, and and a brain. So, and we all want to be happy, and we want to be fulfilled, and we want success, whatever that looks like for us, and we want
Mhm.
those same things for our children that we want for ourselves, and it's the same.
Mhm.
So to be lost in those things that that really, even genetically, I think it's like we're pretty much 99% the same genetically. There's
Yeah.
only slight differences in our DNA that gives us these physical differences that
Mhm.
make us look different, but realistically, we're not, and we're the same. So, and I also tell people, I said, when it comes to, I finally realized when it comes to folks, liking me or not liking me, if I haven't done something, that's really harmful or offensive, I tell people are like ice cream flavors, right? There's about 1,000 different flavors of ice cream.
Right.
So just because I don't like your flavor, don't make it nasty. Because you don't like my flavor, don't make it nasty.
Right.
Or say, and just because I ain't your flavor, don't mean I ain't delicious.
I might have to use that one.
Right. you know so we I think it's important for us to keep that in mind, right?
Right.
And I also, in the same way, when it comes to purpose, our bodies are composed of 60 trillion cells,
Hmm.
and those 60 trillion cells, they form organs, and those organs are located in different places, different locations, and they have different functions. And so I could have 5 hearts and no liver, and guess what? I'm still dead, because of the fact that a vital organ is missing.
Hmm.
If too much of my skin is damaged, then I'm subject to get an infection, and the body dying, because there's it's the largest organ of the whole body, and other organs can't do what it does.
Mm.
Or when I'm getting really cheeky, getting spicy. I tell folks, I said, as much as folks want to talk down on the anus, let that sucker back up and see if it ain't got some problems. So it's I think it's important for us to recognize our own individuality and
Hmm.
what we have, as opposed to what we don't have and what's missing, and then use that to build upon whatever I'm uniquely designed and purpose to do. And it has value even though it's not your design and purpose.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
That was spot on.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So you've been spot on today too. So I obviously thank you for being just such a tremendous guest, and sharing, your international travel experiences, and how they've expanded your awareness and your identity and your perspective and the things that you value. And I'm sure that the tremendous impact and influence that it is having upon those that you work with,
Hmm.
and the way it's changing lives.
Right. Right. Yeah, I tell you what, that Kenyan Young Men Empowerment Summit really, I harp back on that because I saw the impact that
Mhm.
it made on these young folks' lives. So I'm all smiles with that.
So wonderful. So again, thank you so much for that work that you do. And then just real quickly, how can they get in touch with you, and where can they find your book? Your
Yeah,
book.
so there's a couple ways. You can go to my website, which is terryspainconsulting.com, or you can reach me on LinkedIn on the Terry Spain, or you can reach me on my Instagram, which I'm very active on. It's at Terry Spain 21, or you can reach me on Facebook because I'm on there as well, and I'm also on Threads also. So there's so many different ways that you can reach me, and then the book is actually on Amazon also. But if you go to my website and order the book, I'll be able to sign it, and I like to put little goodies in the bag. So you won't be able to get that off of Amazon, but if you go to my website, you'll be able to get the little goodies. So go to terryspainconsulting.com and you won't be disappointed.
Awesome, awesome. And so with that, I want to thank my amazing guest, Dr. Terry
Thank you.
Spain.
Thank you.
It has indeed been a pleasure. And of course, I'm hoping you'll come back again sometime.
Most definitely. I most certainly will.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
I am your host, Dr. Balin A. Durr, awakening and empowering you to live out your infinite potential, to live life in a sweet spot. I'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us today in the sweet spot. Share, follow, and like us on social media. To learn more, please visit balinadermd.com, spelled BALINADURRMD.com. Join us next week, and remember, when you heal your mind, all things are possible.